More than 2,500 years ago, the Prince Siddhartha left his palace in northern India to seek enlightenment. After years of searching and meditation, he attained his goal, and he became known as the Buddha, the awakened one. At first, the Buddha remained silent, thinking that no one would be able to understand the simple and profound truth he had discovered. The local gods then appeared and asked the Buddha to teach. In tribute to his enlightenment, they offered him the golden wheel of a universal monarch. 2 deer came out of the forest and bowed to the wheel, and the Buddha began to teach. For 40 years, the Buddha taught throughout India. After his death, his teachings spread through Asia, eventually reaching Tibet. While Muslim invasions destroyed Buddhism in India, the teachings of the Buddha flourished in Tibet. Hidden from the world by the great peaks of the Himalayas, Tibet became a center of Buddhist practice, art, and learning. Great monasteries and universities were established, and the Buddhist teachings permeated the life and culture of the Tibetan people. Four major schools of Buddhism developed in Tibet: the Nyingma, the Kagyu, the Sakya, and the Gelugpa school of the Dalai Lamas. The Kagyu, or lineage known as the sacred word, was transmitted by the Indian scholar and meditation master Naropa to the Tibetan Marpa in the 11th century, and from Marpa to Tibet's great yogi and poet Milarepa. For the last 800 years, the Kagyu school has been led by a succession of 16 incarnate teachers who have been proclaimed as the Black Hat Lamas, or the Karmapas. Uniquely, each Karmapa has foretold the circumstance of his next rebirth. The 15th Karmapa, Rigpe Dordże, died in 1922. The Venerable Kalu Rinpoche, a senior meditation master of the Kagyu order, remembers.
When the 15th Karmapa was on his deathbed, he wrote a letter predicting the birth of the 16th Karmapa, the year, the month, the name of the mother, and that he would be born on the full moon day. The 16th Karmapa was born and then found according to this prediction. He was enthroned and thoroughly trained and began performing Buddha activity as vast as the blue sky. He came to be known everywhere as Karmapa Rangdziung Rigpe Dordże, the wish-fulfilling gem.
Rangdziung Rigpe Dordże, the 16th Karmapa, was born in Tibet in 1924. Buddhists hold that great teachers such as Karmapa choose to be reborn into this world again and again because they have taken a vow to help all beings reach enlightenment. According to a Tibetan scripture, the fame of the lineage known as the precious Kagyu is proclaimed in the world by a drum whose sound is all-pervasive. The Karmapas point out the great highway by which the Buddhas have become enlightened. The name Karmapa means he who performs the activity of a Buddha. The Karmapa now has his seat at Rumtek Monastery in Sikkim, India. He left Tibet in 1959 when the communist invasion shattered the country's isolation and forced its spiritual leaders into exile. The mountain range separating Sikkim and Tibet, still under communist occupation, can be clearly seen from Rumtek. Taishi Namgyal, nephew of the Karmapa, was raised at Rumtek.
Long before the communist invasion, His Holiness Karmapa told most of his followers and many other Tibetans that the communists were going to take over Tibet and that they should try to go to India. As history goes, the ninth Karmapa had built a monastery at Rumtek. So the king of Sikkim and people of Sikkim invited His Holiness to stay in his own monastery there. Of course, His Holiness had a much greater vision, so he decided to build the new Rumtek monastery.
In keeping with Tibetan tradition, a lay community has grown up around the monastery.
The Tibetan refugees just wanted to live with His Holiness, to live at Rumtek Monastery, and to practice Buddhism. To put it simply, His Holiness is everything that people of Rumtek have. He is the spiritual leader. He is like a king. So I think everything they have is His Holiness.
The monks of Rumtek say there was no master architectural design, and the new monastery was built purely from the Karmapa's inspiration and memory. Many of the 250 monks at Rumtek are children who have been placed in the Karmapa's protection by their parents to receive an education and training in the Buddhist path. Once they are grown, they are free to leave the monastery or remain and renew their vows. At Rumtek, the monks follow the way of the Buddha through chanting, ritual, and the practice of meditation. Meditation practice is the very basis of the Buddha's teachings. His Holiness Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche, a great meditation master of the Nyingma school, talks to a Western student about the practice of meditation.
An average person's mind is full of thoughts and confused. In order to calm this down so that we can understand our mind, we do the meditation practice called shamatha, or peace. For example, if you place a bottle lamp outside, the wind blows the flame back and forth. In order to calm the flame, we place glass around it. The flame is like our mind, and the glass is like shamatha meditation.
In Buddhism, the intuitive experience of meditation is joined to the intellectual study of Buddhist scripture. The course of study at the Nalanda school at Rumtek takes 11 years. The lecture is followed by examination and debate. To fully integrate study and meditation practice, each monk undertakes a retreat of 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days at this meditation center above the monastery. Close to the retreat center are the personal quarters of the Karmapa. The training of a new generation of monks at Rumtek has been an important task for the Karmapa. When he left Tibet in 1959, the Karmapa brought with him 4 small children, who were his principal students. Shamar Rinpoche, Tai Situ Rinpoche, Jamgon Kontrul Rinpoche, and Gyal Tsap Rinpoche. According to the Kagyu tradition, each was an enlightened teacher in his last life. They were all discovered by the Karmapa as infants. His Eminence, Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche.
My deepest relationship with His Holiness is that he is my root teacher. He is my spiritual and temporal guide. This relationship goes back to many previous lives, which is something unexpressible, not just for 1 or 2 lives, but for a long, long time.
The Karmapa pays attention to every detail in his students' lives. Here he instructs the young Shamar Rinpoche, also known as the Red Hat Lama, in the practice of meditation. To his disciples, the Karmapa is the Buddha himself. Thus, in meditation, the student can meet the mind of the Buddha, the mind of enlightenment. His Eminence, Tai Situ Rinpoche.
This is the lineage of the transmission of inner realization, directly from the master to disciple. It is more than from a teacher to the student. The master is who really you have devotion from deep inside.
When they are ready, the students receive the most advanced teachings of the lineage. The purpose of these teachings is to cut through all self-deception so that the wisdom and compassion of a Buddha may be born in each of them. Here, the Karmapa instructs his students in the use of the bell and Dordje. In this practice, the bell signifies knowledge and wisdom, and the Dordje signifies the power of compassion. The young students soon become teachers themselves. Tai Situ Rinpoche is now in his late 20s. He's seen here in the Karmapa's aviary.
In the whole world, let's say, the older beings, there's nobody who wanted to be suffered. And the Dharma is, what is the cause of suffering? What is the suffering itself? What is the cause of happiness? What is the happiness itself? As older beings don't want to be suffered, to accomplish or fulfill this wish for the old being, that is very, very basic meanings of the Dharma.
In recent years, a number of Western students have come to Rumtek to study with Kagyu teachers like Jamgun Khantrul Rinpoche.
I've noticed through my own experience with the West that the new student gets very excited, hoping for immediate results. In Buddhism, one is required to go through various stages. It is a step-by-step process in which you receive teaching from your teacher and then follow his instructions one by one. If you rush up a ladder in order to get to the top more quickly, there is a chance that you might fall and break your head. When you study Buddhism, you have to go in a gradual way, not hoping to get enlightened the next morning when you wake up.
Beginning in the late 1960s, a number of the Kagyu teachers who had escaped from Tibet came to the West to teach and to live. By the mid-70s, there were several thousand Westerners studying with these teachers in Europe and in North America. Here, students practice meditation under the guidance of the Vajracharya, the Venerable Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Trungpa Rinpoche has become one of the foremost teachers of Buddhism in the West.
The practice of religion, not necessarily as a sectarianism, but basic religion is common sense of how to be oneself gentle and decent, and also how to tame one's mind so that we can help ourselves, in turn that we can help others.
In 1974, the Karmapa made his first visit to the West. During that time, he came to Vajradhatu, a Buddhist center in Boulder, Colorado, at the invitation of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. The Vajra regent, Usel Tenzin, the principal student of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, first met the Karmapa at that time.
As soon as I saw him for the first time, it was breathtaking in a way. When he appeared on the scene, it was like the sun coming up in the morning in a cloudless sky. It just brightened up everything, illuminated the whole environment, you know. And more than that, he actually could affect people's lives so that they somehow shed their burden about themselves. And just seeing him made us happy, made me happy. I remember that in a simple way. A simple gesture made you feel like there was a very definite goodness in the world.
Very good. Very good name. Very good. Hi. Hi. Like this? Thank you. Oh, very good.
A Tibetan prophecy from the 10th century foretold that when the iron bird flies and horses run on wheels, the teachings of the Buddha will come to the land of the red man. In 1974, the Karmapa visited the Hopi Nation in Arizona. According to Hopi prophecy, during the decline of the spiritual forces in the West, men will come with red hats and reveal themselves to be the true friends of the Hopi people. The Karmapa was recognized as such a man. And he was credited by the Hopi for creating a rainstorm in the middle of a drought. The last stop on the Karmapa's tour of the United States was San Francisco. In San Francisco, as elsewhere on the tour, the Karmapa performed the ceremony of the Black Crown. In the 15th century, young Lo, emperor of China, had a vision of the Black Crown floating over the 5th Karmapa's head. He then had an actual crown made according to his vision. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche.
The Black Crown ceremony is not regarded as just displaying authority and power and glory alone. When he puts the Black Crown, he transforms himself into the Buddha of compassion, and it creates various wonders in the people's mind, and they begin to become part of His Holiness's mind.
The Karmapa made his third and last public visit to North America in 1980. At that time, he consecrated the site of Karma Triyana Dharma Chakra, a monastery to be built near Woodstock in New York State. The monastery is to be a major center for training Western and Tibetan monks. It will also be the seat of the Karmapas in America. In 1980, it became known that the Karmapa was seriously ill with cancer. The following year, the Karmapa died in a hospital in Illinois. Dr. Mitchell Levy was a physician to the Karmapa at this time.
The thing that struck me most about His Holiness was his overwhelming, unceasing kindness that never wavered. It was the unwavering quality. Watching, as a physician, an unstoppable illness ravage his body, and yet this kindness that never stopped. Every morning, I would go in and ask him, "Are you having pain?" And he would always say, "No." And towards the end, it became sort of a running joke, so that the first thing in the morning when I'd go in to see His Holiness, before I could say anything, he'd smile at me and say, "No, no pain, no pain." It was very confusing to the staff. We were overwhelmed because it was obvious he wasn't just denying his illness, and he didn't look like he was in pain. So the staff was constantly confronted with this person who was dying, but was still more interested in how they felt than in how he felt.
Following the Karmapa's death, his principal students asked that his remains be allowed to stay in his hospital room for a few days. The staff agreed to this unusual request.
They felt by the end that they would do anything to respect the wishes of His Holiness. And so they had no problem breaking a rule which is extremely hard and fast in hospitals. When patients die, they are taken away and not left in the room. And yet, because of the impact and that His Holiness had, and how much the staff and the administration cared for him, they allowed this to happen. After the first 24 hours, his principal students invited me into the room and had me hold my hand over His Holiness's heart area. And each day, I was amazed to find that it stayed warm. I wasn't as amazed after 24 hours, but then after 48 and 72 hours, I was beginning to be quite shocked. Traditionally, shortly after death, the body becomes cold as the circulation stops. And in His Holiness's case, there was a definite warmth over the area of the heart. As a physician, I have no explanation for this.
The remains of the Karmapa were flown back in state to Sikkim. At Rumtek, the remains were placed within a central shrine in the posture of sitting meditation. Tashi Namgyal.
In the beginning, when they heard the news, nobody would believe, Nobody. For myself, for about 1 week, I was just feeling empty, as if I was thrown from a plane, from a great distance, just empty, that's all.
A chitan, or special shrine representing the body, speech, and mind of enlightenment, was constructed to contain the remains of the Karmapa during the forthcoming cremation. During the 7-week interim period, ceremonies were performed continuously at the monastery. The ceremonies were led by the Karmapa's four main students who had come of age and assumed their responsibilities as the guardians or regents of the lineage. Taisitu Rinpoche.
All the rituals of Buddhist practice, they are not just a cultural thing. The Kala chakra is one of the highest Vajrayana and ritual. For the cremation of His Holiness Karmapa, we're doing this Kala chakra to purify and confess the obstacles of all the disciples of His Holiness, and at the same time for the purpose of requesting for the quick return of Him for the sake of all sentient beings, especially for the guidance of the peoples of the earth.
Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche arrives from America with some of his Western students.
Once you're born, and the minute when your umbilical cord is being cut, and there is a beginning of next thing, which is the death. I don't want to be particularly morbid, but nonetheless, that once we, as we say, once, how does it go? It's, when something goes up, must come down. So that's the notion of impermanence. Is once you have created something, it is subject to decay, and we don't regard it as a particularly punishment or curse of anything at all. It's in fact feels that some sense of relief from the pain, and also some sense of appreciation of one's life at the time.
The Americans join with the Tibetan monks in ceremonies for the rebirth of the Karmapa. They chant, "The excellent wealth of gods and men, complete and flawless, I set out before you and offer to you. Please accept it with thoughts of love and kindness. Having accepted it, please grant your blessings." Dawn on the day of the cremation. The remains of the Karmapa have been placed in the Chutun, at the center of the monastery's main balcony. A crowd of over 10,000 is gathered, including representatives of all sects of Tibetan Buddhism. Each person files past the Chutin to present a white silk scarf to the Karmapa. The Indian governor of Sikkim comes to pay his last respects. The royal family of Bhutan. The Sikkimese division of the Indian National Guard salutes the 16th Karmapa. Ursel Tenzin.
I last saw the Karmapa about a week before his death. His eyes were perfectly clear, and when we looked at each other, there was a common understanding of death as not being a big deal, particularly, but an ordinary experience, the same as birth, and the same as every experience that we have in our life, that we relate to it in a very direct and simple way. And knowing that it would probably be the last time that I saw him, I put my head down to receive his blessing. And at that point, I just began crying. And I cried, and he touched my head. And after I stopped crying, I looked up, and there he was looking directly at me. And he said, with a slight smile on his face, "Nothing happens." And at that point, I realized again the truth of impermanence, and also the fact that the Karmapa himself was a completely realized being.
By tradition, the cremation fire must be lit by someone who has had no personal relationship with the Karmapa. A monk has been found who has only recently arrived from Tibet. As the fire is about to be lit, a rainbow appears in the blue sky. Situ Rinpoche.
I think during the cremation, lots of disciples and the lineage holder of His Holiness came together with certain amount of their followers. And all of their feeling in that time is more than just cremating His Holiness' body. It is a very big event, which is total, alive, enlightened event.
The four regents of the Kagyu lineage wear princely robes and crowns which represent the enlightened wisdom of all Buddhas. In their practice, they realize that the fundamental nature of every human being is inseparable from the nature of a Buddha. Their Eminences, Shamar Rinpoche, Tai Situ Rinpoche, Jamgon Kontrul Rinpoche, and Galsap Rinpoche will be responsible for the teaching and the training of the 17th Karmapa, just as the former Karmapa once trained them. Until the next incarnation is found, the Chutan will be sealed with the ashes inside it. Tai Situ Rinpoche.
All the Karmapas, they recognize themselves by themselves. It means they leave letter which explains about where they're going to be born and what is the name of their father and mother, which year he will take the birth. Our 16th Karmapa left letter, and this letter will be opened on the right time, and we will find out everything from that letter. There's no doubt about it.
We have experienced that the death of His Holiness, or passing away into the nirvana of His Holiness, and that is regarded as message to us to realize the meaning of impermanence, futility of world, and nonetheless that he left a very strange mixture of joy and sad together. And his funeral was somewhat a celebration, but at the same time it is mark of future joy.
Thank you.